So now we will listen to a talk about dog cognition. In recent years, there has been an increasing interest in dog cognition, and you will understand why. It's a particular angle which is very interesting. So it's Miklósi Ádám from Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, who will tell us about this. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me, and obviously now we had quite a few, and if you are here representing species basically, so it's not a dog conference, not everybody's talking about dogs, rather everyone is talking about different species. There's this wish to show that your species is actually the most skillful, just avoiding the word intelligence. And so I won't argue for the case of the dogs, because first of all, I assume based on statistical knowledge or experience is that half of the group here, at least half, probably 60%, has a dog at home. So for those people, I mean, it's not a question that dogs are one of the most intelligent creatures on the world. And second is, I think, also what we could say that, or say that whether they are skillful or not, that's another issue, but I think they made a very interesting decision many thousand years ago, and this was, I think, an intelligent decision to accompany sort of an intelligent other species, the humans. So basically they have this intelligence to make a good choice, and I think the dog evolution compared to the not so fortunate wolf evolution had made a huge change by these human-dog aliens, and so dogs are living with us in our cities, in our gardens, in our flats, everywhere, and I think this is a very exciting situation. And for us, many years ago in Budapest, I mean, that was the first question, how these aliens between the two very different species with a very different evolutionary history is working apparently quite well for both sides. So it seems that dogs are sort of enjoying it, and also the humans have a lot of interest in this relationship, and we just keep on keeping them, and sometimes for not obvious reasons why we have a dog at home. So, and when we sort of talked with Eric about the topic, what should I talk about, is that, again, I was sort of not sure, because there's so much is now known, and there's so much research on dogs, so probably what I will mention today is not new for many people, but we came up with this title, but then I forgot to check how long the talk could be. So, and few days ago, I realized that it will be only a few minutes, so I really had to decide what I will talk about very specifically. So, the topic is basically what can a dog learn from its owner, so basically learning from another one. And I think this is a very interesting question, and some talks already touched upon this phenomena, this skill, what we basically call social learning. So social learning is a very interesting phenomena, and traditionally it was the human being who was thought being excelling at this skill. So basically learning by observation, using the other fellow human as a source of information, and then obviously because you are not seeing the phenomenon of learning, so nobody sees when learning actually takes place. You can only know about that learning has taken place by observing a change in the behavior of the other. So basically the idea is that you are observing, or anybody can observe somebody and get some information, but that this information has to be shown in a changed behavior. So that's how researchers also work, so by observing this process of learning. Now, you can see that especially, as I said, the phenomenon was associated with the humans, but let's say from the 50s and the last century, more and more evidence emerged that animals might also be able to learn socially, and for ethologists, actually that's not a surprise, because obviously social beings, social animals could use their other fellow members for source of information, and this is, for example, the Japanese macaques that you can see on the lower picture. This is one of the famous examples, the so-called potato washing monkeys, when they learned from one monkey started to show this habit on a Japanese island, and then the other monkeys in the troop took over and obviously it was a case for learning by observation. Now, why at all animals, or including humans, would learn socially? Obviously, there are many reasons for this. One is that people arguing that learning from another is actually very advantageous because you don't have to do the job of finding out the problem or solving the problem of yourself. So usually, if you are totally alone, the only way to solve a problem is by what we call try and error learning. So you try out something and whether it works or not, and then it will determine your next attempt. Now, if you have already a skillful fellow member, then you can just observe his behavior, and then you can skip all this try and error part. So you can save time. It's a very efficient way of doing. And usually, if you can assume that the experienced individual has his experience is a very useful one because he's still alive. He has had the chance to made this experience before. Now there are obviously many situations, so you can this social learning might take place between younger and older individuals, because youngers are normally less experienced, but nowadays it seems to be sometimes turning over. In case of humans, sometimes young people teach older people how to live in this life where we have mobile phones and complicated equipment. And obviously you have also situations where you know a solution, but it seems to be less effective, and then you observe another person showing or demonstrating some new and more effective skill, so you can do this by observation. Basically, what happens in this setup is that you have a demonstrator, a knowledgeable individual, and then you have an observer that is usually assumed to be a naive observer, so he doesn't know the solution, and then this interaction leads to, in some situations, to learning in the observer. And that's what we have to find out, or we can show in our experiments. Now, what you can, or animals, or even humans can learn about? So what kind of information can be transferred? There was a huge debate it was going on for many years among researchers, but basically there are 4 categories that is kind of information, categories for information, what one can learn about. One is, for example, that you can learn about places. So, I mean, we did it verbally after the last lecture, but we could have done it on social ways, though if Eric would just show, okay, just go off for the restaurant, and everybody would follow him by finding out where the restaurant is or the lunch. So basically, learning from another where a specific place is can be done by observing the behavior. And this is very useful skill, actually, if you go to a foreign country, especially if you don't speak the language, just follow what others are doing. But you can also learn, or animals can also learn, probably relationship between an action, what you are doing, and things that might happen in concert or after this action is carried out. You can learn by the goals of others, and also what you can also learn, or it's possible to learn about the behavior, about a specific action that is carried out. And here, for example, both pictures are showing from famous studies when dolphins in the left picture is sort of trained to imitate human behavior, and also the orangutan, this is a more spontaneous situation when they are imitating human activities. Here what you can see is actually the orangutan is imitating a washing activity, so the person on the far right is doing a washing, and then the orangutan is copying that behavior more or less, and this is an obvious similarity between the 2 actions. So this is also quite interesting for ethological research, but also what is even specific, and both examples are for this also very nice, that sometimes social learning takes place between species. So you learn not from your own species, but you learn from another one. And here is where the human-dog relationship is really exciting, because here we have 2 animals that are very different, not just in their cognitive skills, but also in their anatomical structures, and still they seem to, or that was a question, whether we can show that dogs and humans might learn from each other. Obviously, our main question was whether dogs can learn by observation from humans. The interesting thing was that although it was a very simple, naive, and for us at least interesting question, there was no evidence, I mean no research data, up until the year 2000 basically, or whether dogs can learn by observation anything from humans. Although, and if you talk to dog trainers at that time, they were not really aware that this might be a very useful thing to include in dog training. So the idea is that dogs not just are trained by the classical Pavlovian or operant conditioning methods, but actually you are just training a dog just how you would train a child in a sense, because how you teach children is usually based on social learning, at least quite a lot, and especially if they don't have the necessary verbal or linguistic skills, so when they are young. So when you want to show how to manipulate an object, you will say to the child, okay, just watch me and I show it to you, and then you can learn it by observation. So this very trivial human behavior was never applied in this interspecific relationship, which for us was a little bit strange, and also we could not still answer why people are not using this possibility. Obviously, it would be good to show that dogs are actually learning if you're using this method. And the other issue is that, so for us was really the question whether dogs can really learn from humans just by observation. Now, I mean, as I said, after 2000, there are now many a lot of evidence for this, so there's not a question anymore. And in the rest of my talk, I just want to refer to some of these data in some experiments. And just the first one, obviously, what is also interesting, social learning should not only happen between dogs and humans, but also dogs might learn from each other. And here is an interesting case, I think, that also have some practical applications, maybe, that one dog can learn from another food preference. So the food what one dog might prefer could be depending on what that dog, what kind of information this dog got from another one. And this experiment, but probably most dog people can try out and can do at home also if the dog has other dog friends in the park or where they walk with them. So the idea is that dogs are socialized, so they know each other, they like each other, they are sort of friends in a dog world. And basically you feed one dog with a specific food that has some herb content. Either in this experiment they used basil or thyme, and then what you do is that this is then the experienced dog, and then the naive dog who has no experience with those herbs has a chance to sniff at the other dog's mouth for a short time. Then the so-called demonstrator dog is removed, and then you offer the naive dog, the observer dog, the sniffer dog, the food with two different herbs. And what the researcher found in these experiments, there is a chance that the dog would show at 50%, but basically what you can see is that here that most of the dogs show the preference for either herb that was demonstrated by the other dog. So basically the olfactory cue was enough to modify the dog's preference towards food, towards a specific food. And I think this explains very nicely also why companies are so keen on providing food with different herbs and different spices like bacon or whatever, or chicken or salmon, because this is not just a food, but it has an odor content. So, and dogs might transfer this preference from one to the other, usually from the mother to the puppies. And so you should not be surprised if your puppy likes the same food as the mother dog liked, because part of this, not everything, but part of this might be just simple social learning. So the companies can sell their food for these animals, and because the owners would buy it. They show also preference for that food, obviously. Another experiment, what we did in our lab few years ago, was showing, I think the first time really, that dogs might be able to learn by observation. And for this we use this very simple task. This is the simple detour problem. You can see that there is a small, target behind the fence, and the dog's task is very simple. They have to figure out how to move from this point to the target. And if you are just getting simple family dogs from Budapest to face this task, then this is what you usually see. So at the first time, they are not really able, or some of them are not, some can, some others are not able to show this, to solve this problem. That you can see they also watch the owner, say, okay, in a sort of way, okay, what shall I do, and so on. So basically what you have is they learn, but this is the latency. So the latency is for running around the fence. So you start here and then running around. This would be the solution. And if you have okay, no, I moved the cursor, but not okay. So here the latency is not really decreasing. So in the first 3 occasions, they don't really learn too much. Eventually, they learn if they have many more chances to try in this situation. However, if you have this sort of setup, and we are now using a dog as a demonstrator, not a human. So this is now a demonstrator dog, a skillful dog that was trained, and here we have the naive observer dog watching what's going on for the first time. Then what you can see very shortly is that now this German Shepherd will be allowed to approach the target, and the dog will solve this problem very rapidly. So they seem to learn very fast after some observation. And and then now, so this is, you can really see the change. So here the first time this group is very much the same as those ones, but if they observe a demonstrator after their first attempt, then immediately their performance drops. So the latency, so the time they going around is much shorter. So the logs, we can really assume that they have learned about this situation. Now, even social learning can also help if in situations where you know the solution, but this is not valid anymore. And in this variation of the experiment, and then you just have to concentrate on the second half of the figure, is that dogs are facing the same fence, but for the first trial, there is this door on the fence is open. So the idea is that the dogs can go through the door directly to the target. Now, at the second trial, or before the second trial, we close this door. And then, obviously, the dogs have a problem now because their solution that they have just learned is not functioning anymore. So they have to change the strategy how to approach the food because they really want to get to the target. And then we have, again, 2 groups of dogs. One group here on the left has no demonstration, so they are on their own. They have to figure it out based on try and error. And this group has the chance, they are the lucky ones, that they have a demonstrator, an experienced person who is showing them the solution. And then you can see, again, in the situation is the same, that those dogs are basically not able to master the task. So they spend 1 minute and they still want to try to go through the closed door. However, these guys, they are changing their behavior probably because they had this experience from the human demonstration, and they are solving this task by rapidly or relatively rapidly going around. So I think this shows very nicely that really dogs can learn by observation. Now I have to skip some slides. The other question was that, well, dogs can learn sort of this general type of information, but can they also learn about behavior? So about the actions of humans. And this form of social learning, now most researchers agree, is called imitation, when really the learning is about behavior. So not about places, not about general goals, but actually behavior that is shown by the demonstrator. And you can see here some human examples or the human dog example, basically whether it's made up pictures or just lucky coincidence, we don't know. But the idea here is that the behavior at the behavior level, the behaviors of the 2 individuals become very similar, and we think this is not just an accident, but actually it is a representation of learning. By the way, this game, what these 2 children play here, might be familiar to some older parents or younger parents. This is the sort of game what people often call the do as I do game. So I said the game is like this. I show an action, an unlikely action or whatever in my body usually, and then I tell the child, do as I do, or simply do it, and we expect the child to repeat this action. This makes obviously more fun for children that are 1 or 2 year old with not so well developed motor ability. So, and then obviously if the child is successful, then everyone is happy. So we can continue this game, and so you can even teach the children some motor skills. So the idea was that this task that was first, by the way, used in animal cognition with chimpanzees, which is actually quite obvious given the similarities, we could also use with dogs, which was actually a quite unlikely possibility, but we really tried. But of course, for a dog, you really need to train the dog to understand the rule of the game. So the idea was that we took a dog that you can see, Philip, that was called the dog. Richard is the owner of the dog. It was a dog for the disabled people, trained as a dog assistant dog, and we saw that, okay, let's try this to play this game with Philip after some training. And we devised a training method how to progress step by step with Philip in this learning task. So first we took 3 actions that should be imitated, so basically repeated after human demonstration, and then we had another 6 actions, and so on and so forth. And basically what we set up, and you will see it in a minute also in a video, a situation. This is now a top view where you have a human and the dog facing each other, and there are many objects in this room, and then different actions are shown by the human demonstrator, and the task of the dog is to repeat this action upon a command that is always the same: do it or do as I do, whatever you are using in the training. Yes, thank you. There is more on that watch. Anyway, and what you can see is also the problem here is that the actions of humans is matching only partly. So you have the human lying. This is not the same anatomically as lying for the dog. Or if you say the human is putting in a ball in a box, then you can see also the dogs are using different parts of the body to achieve the same. So here's what is a short demo video that I can show you from a paper that shows now one action after the other performed by the human and then performed by the dog. And you can see how this training, and this is now basically the testing is done. So Joseph was just lying down and then said to the dog, do it. Now the dog is repeating the action, and then you will see a series of other actions. He gets a little bit of a reward just to continue this relatively boring task for a dog, and so on. But now giving an object to the owner, and then the dog is also repeating this action. And we can see that we just watch another one. You can see them manipulating the same object in a different way, and Philip is also able to do that as well. Okay, now we did many training variations of this training. Sorry, and then we also got involved, Claudia, in even improving this method. But I think what is really crucial here in all these imitation games is that the actions that are imitated should be really novel in some ways. Now the dog has a very restricted morphology. You can't do too many. They can't do so many things with their body as we can. So we have to be very skillful in devising new tasks. So here's one, for example, that Philip was imitating successfully, and this task is a new one because the specific actions or parts of that task has been never performed before in such a chain. So what you see is what Richard is showing to the dog is opening the cupboard, then taking an object out and then putting this object in this little bin. And then Philip knows all these actions, so he was trained of opening the cupboards and taking things out and so on and so on. But he never was facing this sequence of action, and he was never told or commanded by that do it command in this situation. And despite of this, you can see that he was very good in this task. So I don't have time to show you all the videos, unfortunately, but just let me show you another one where we can show that dogs are actually remembering quite well of these demonstrations. And here's another recording that shows that dogs can remember on this recording for half a minute for about a demonstration that was done some time before. But also we have now evidence that dogs can actually remember for up to 1 day, so basically 24 hours for a demonstration. So here's again the classic setup. So the person you have to wait until the dog is really ready to participate in the experiment, but then eventually she will get the attention of the dog, and then she will show an action that is the dog has never seen before. So so now she is showing the action, which is basically sitting on the top of the chair, what you should not really do, but for science, I mean, you have to sacrifice sometimes things. So now yes, so this is the demonstration. Then the dog is now taken to another place where different activities can take place. Basically, we want the dog to forget what he has seen. Obviously, this is not what we want, but we try to make them active and think about other things. So, and then this is now a short one, so I choose a short video that we don't have to wait by tomorrow to actually have the result with this 24-hour delay. So now after this short delay, they go back to the location, and the owner or the trainer would tell the dog only do it, and hopefully if the dog remembers what the action was, then we okay, it stopped. Strange. Anyway, so I don't know why it's not showing it, but it should have. Good. Okay. So unfortunately, I don't have time to show all the other versions of learning by imitation. But really, it turned out that also, to our surprise, that dogs are really quite skillful in imitating human behavior, and it also revealed that dogs can remember those actions that humans have showed them before for a long time. So that is also, we have to be very careful what we do in front of our dogs, because they really remember what we are doing, even if they are not telling us later. So thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much. We have time for 3 questions this time. Yes, Lars?
I just wondered what you think such instances of heterospecific social learning or imitation tell us about the need for mirror neurons, or indeed the nature of mirror neurons that some people claim are necessary for imitation.
Well, I mean, yes. So obviously, and being not a neurobiologist, the honest answer is I don't know. But however, what I would think about this is that probably dogs and most creatures have some sort of neurons that take up this function, and neurons might be also playing a role here. But I think to have imitation-like abilities, you don't need mirror neurons, or these are not always working, or not really involved in the processing. So I mean, we could teach. Maybe they help and they are sort of facilitating the imitation, but they are not necessarily there in that sense. And because of the definition of imitation is anyway quite flexible, depending on, for example, copying action sequences are also part of the imitation definition. I think neural neurons might be not the important condition to imitate at some level.
More questions? Oh, 2. Yeah. First back there.
Okay, if I understood I'm not sure whether I understood the question. Well, I mean, the rope or the leash for the dog, yes, it is signaling the future, in a sense, what kind of action will happen. But this is, I mean, this kind of expectancy you can get in any animal, so that's not or in many situations, so that's not special, not about social learning. Here what we are trying to show, that the dog can learn about human behavior and transfer this knowledge onto his body or body schema. So I think this is what in social learning is different from the traditional learning, because here you are using this information from your perspective in some ways.
A very quick question.
I was just wondering if they imitate us, the dogs. They imitate us without we have to talk to them. We can say nothing. You don't talk to them.
Yes, I mean for us the comment we needed a comment in order to make time the event, so the dogs have to show the action.
Yes.
But obviously this skill is probably natural skill, so dogs are imitating us, or at least they try to imitate us during their typical life. The problem, I think, is generally that you don't like this, that the dogs are imitating you. And a classic example that I tell people is that you go out in the garden, you start digging for your plants, and then the dogs, what's a nice behavior to imitate, is the dog thinking. They also go out and dig, and then you say to the dog, do not do it. So at the end, the dogs learn that imitation is not a good idea, by the way. So basically, we reteach them imitating in a specific context.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.